Hello, listeners, and welcome to the NK News Podcast. I'm your host, Jacko Zwetsloot, and today it is Wednesday, the 14th of January, 2026, and I'm recording this episode via StreamYard. We've got two guests, and we're going to be talking about what's happened in Venezuela recently and what North Korea might be learning from that. Both guests have written about Venezuela and North Korean relations in the past, and both are currently in Latin America looking at Venezuela from two different geographical directions. We have Dr. Camilo Aguirre Torrini, whose work traces DPRK Latin America ties across history and sanctions era politics. He's joining us from Chile, and he wrote a piece for 38 North back in October 2021 called Can Venezuela and the DPRK Wipe the Slate Clean and Make a Fresh Start? And also joining me is Dr. Gabriela Bernal, who is a North Korea analyst and non-resident fellow at the European Center for North Korean Studies, who writes on Pyongyang's external relations and information strategy, among other topics. She's joining us from the Netherlands Antilles island of Curaçao. Gabriela wrote an analysis just last week for NK Pro entitled Where North Korea-Venezuela Ties Stand After Nicolás Maduro's Downfall. So welcome on the show, both of you, Camilo and Gabriela.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, so obviously, anyone who's been watching the news will be aware that in early January, I think it was the 3rd local time, Venezuela's President Nicolás Maduro was seized and taken to the U.S., jolting one of Pyongyang's few political friendships. For listeners who are new to this story, what happened and why does it matter to North Korea? And Gabriela, I'll have you start.
Sure. So President Trump decided to pretty much depose the Maduro government, which he has not been a fan of. He's made that clear over the past, ever since he took office. Trump has taken over actually quite a few oil tankers over the past few months off the coast of Venezuela, signaling that something bigger was coming. So it was not completely unexpected, but still the speed at which the operation took place was very surprising, I think, for a lot of us in the region. And why it matters to Pyongyang is because, of course, North Korea is one of the most isolated countries in the world. They don't have that many allies. Venezuela is one of its very few allies, and having for Kim Jong Un to see one of his very few friends on the global stage be removed from office in such a swift way, without any, kind of following any kind of legal rules, international norms, it just for North Korea really just reaffirms their distrust for in the U.S. and their decades-long just perspective on the U.S. being this hostile state, as they call it. So this just reaffirmed what North Korea has already been believing for decades. In that sense, that's how it matters a lot to North Korea, and Kim Jong Un will be watching it closely. And the fact that they launched a missile soon after the operation also shows that it was a way of them expressing their displeasure with what Trump did in Venezuela.
Okay, that's a good beginning. Camilla, do you have anything to add to that?
Not really. I think from a historical perspective, it's important to understand that North Korea in the past had allies other than Cuba in the region. For instance, the Chilean government of the Popular Unity in the 70s. So it's not the first time that North Korea has experienced something like this. I don't know. I wish I could engage with a North Korean historian to see if they're aware of this kind of diplomatic milestones, but it seems like every time they gain an ally, there is this reaction from the U.S. and they have to start from the very beginning again and again and again. So it was Chile, now Venezuela. In the past, if we go even to the 60s, it was Uruguay. So for us Latin Americans, we don't like to think that this is the America's backyard, but from a North Korean perspective and seeing all these hegemonic actions, it seems like it is.
Right. Now, what did each of you look for in North Korea's reaction, for example, in state media and diplomatic signaling? What did you look for to sort of gauge a sense of how this activity was being interpreted or seen in North Korea? Gabriela?
Yeah, so first of all, I looked at, of course, the KCNA, so North Korea's state media main channel that talks about, reports about foreign affairs, and to see if a official government statement was made, and they did soon after Trump took over deposed Maduro. North Korean government did send out a statement strongly condemning the action, strongly saying that it was a violation of Venezuela's sovereignty, which are the key words that North Korea likes to use in their state media. So that was very important to see. Again, the missile launch, that was even before the statement. That was also a key sign that North Korea is very closely watching it. And not just that, not just after the Maduro incident, but also before that, North Korea has been, over the past few months, reporting much more about the Venezuela situation, and it's been more in general news reports about what's happening in Venezuela, the US Venezuela situation regarding the oil tankers, but you can see a really big spike in North Korean media's coverage of the Venezuela story. So you can see that Pyongyang has been watching the situation very closely for months now. It is something definitely that is relevant to them. Otherwise, they wouldn't be reporting about it as much.
Now, Camilo, can I ask you to zoom out a little bit and to look at the historical context, at least in the last, say, 5 years? When you wrote an article about Venezuela and North Korea kind of resetting their relationship by opening embassies in each other. So before this month's event, how substantial were relations between North Korea and Venezuela beyond rhetoric and symbolism?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's very hard to go beyond this rhetoric and symbolism, the idea of this brotherhood between two countries that in reality were linked basically due to US sanctions. So it's this powerful country that's isolating these kind of rogue states that brings them together. So I think it's very hard for me as a historian to go beyond that, beyond the rhetoric. But I think that this whole Venezuelan crisis, it's important for North Korea because it's a confirmation that there's no way they can resign their nuclear deterrence. It's something that I believe it's clear for them. And when it comes to reporting the Venezuelan crisis in the local newspapers, and again from a very historical perspective, coming from the 50s, this constant reporting of U.S. hegemonic actions or actions against progressive governments. So I think you can find articles in the Northern Simon or the Pyongyang Times from the 2018 forecasting a possible military action by the U.S. against the Venezuelan government. So I think this gives the North Korea leadership and reinforces this ability to kind of predict the future.
What about in terms of bilateral trade or security cooperation? Was there a lot of that between North Korea and Venezuela?
Not really, as Gabriela mentioned in her piece for NK News. There was this UN commission that was investigating the trade between Venezuela and North Korea, but it wasn't really significant. So for me, as I see it from afar, because I'm in Chile, right? But it's more symbolic than anything.
Mm-hmm. Gabriela, anything you want to add to that?
Sure. Yeah, and there was not so it's been mostly a symbolic alliance, like we've said. But yes, so in 2021, the UN did investigate trade between Venezuela and North Korea to check if it was in violation of sanctions. So the report stated that Venezuela had imported textiles, machinery, electrical equipment, all in violation of UN sanctions, while exporting iron, steel, and other metals to North Korea. But Venezuela and North Korea have both always denied any reports about military arms sales, arms transfers, or any kind of other trade that violates sanctions. So it's practically impossible to get any official data about the numbers of trade between the two countries, but we can assume that it is relatively small because, again, both countries have been under sanctions for a long time. They don't have the economic capacity to trade at very on a large scale, and also the fact that there are sanctions that still does make it more difficult. So we can say there has been trade, of course, over the past few years, but in terms of significant, notable security cooperation, military cooperation, significant arms sales like that, that was not, it's not something that we've seen with concrete proof or evidence. No.
Right. So there's no example, no evidence, for example, that there were any North Korean soldiers in Caracas, in the same way that we heard that there were some Cuban security officers who were killed in this recent American raid on Caracas.
Right. No, not that we know. I mean, that would be very newsworthy,
That
but
would be
no.
noteworthy. But we do know that, I mean, North Korea has a track record of sometimes sending units for training or for assistance to, for example, African countries. So it's interesting that in this case, they didn't have anybody in Venezuela.
Right.
Now, we know that Venezuela opened an embassy in Pyongyang in 2019 and North Korea opened one in Caracas in 2015. The question here, what would the North Korean diplomats in Caracas be reporting back to Pyongyang, well, as of last week after the raid there? Camilo, what are your thoughts, first of all?
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought that North Korea will withdraw the whole mission and to call them back, but they're staying. As far as we know, Chavismo is still in power, so I think that they have a very privileged point of view, and they can inform Pyongyang for this whole attempt of not just overthrowing Maduro, but now comes the very difficult part, because the US is very good at overthrowing governments, but then it comes to nation building. So I think that they have a very privileged perspective, and my belief is that North Korea will try its best to keep them in Caracas as long as they can.
Gabriela, what are you thinking?
Right. Yeah, I think so. Now, of course, the pro-Maduro government is still in place, so we need to see what will happen, of course, because as long as the pro-Maduro government stays in place, there is no real reason for the embassy to close, in theory at least, because it's still the same communist, left-wing government that has had relations with North Korea for decades.
Yeah.
So as long as the current vice president, who is now President Delcy Rodriguez, as long as she remains the leader of Venezuela, which she might or she might not, we don't know. I think that relations between, at least diplomatic relations, should remain the same. But we never know, because of course there should be elections. Elections should be taking place, and of course, if the elections are fair, which I doubt they will be, but if they would be fair, of course, then they would probably elect an opposition figure, and that government then would be then it would raise questions about, would that government maintain diplomatic ties with North Korea? Would they not? I think it would not make much sense for them to do so. I don't see what they would gain from maintaining ties with North Korea. So, but
even before there are elections, with Donald Trump saying that America is basically running Venezuela right now through the new president, is it not possible that, or likely that there might be pressure from Washington for Venezuela to distance itself from countries like North Korea, like Cuba?
I mean, Cuba, yes, definitely, because Cuba, North Korea, Trump has said a lot about Cuba. Trump definitely sees Cuba as a major issue. So Cuba, definitely. North Korea, at least not right now, not so much. I think Trump doesn't see North Korea right now as a major issue in terms of Venezuela, at least, because again, his focus with Venezuela is in that context of the Monroe Doctrine, which they're now calling the Donroe Doctrine. His intention to focus on the Western Hemisphere, on the American continent. So Venezuela, I don't think presents a major threat to Trump. I don't think it's big, like high on his agenda right now. And also, we know that Trump has expressed interest in holding talks with Kim Jong Un, possibly in the future. So if he would explicitly come out and say, "Oh, Venezuela, I want you to, close the DPRK embassy, or expel the DPRK diplomats," that would be sending yet another. I mean, this whole Maduro thing already sent a terrible message to North Korea. So if Trump comes in and says, "Oh, get the North Korean diplomats out," it would just really, it would not help at all with his talk of wanting to, engage diplomatically with North Korea in the future. So I
Mhm.
don't think he would do that right now for those reasons.
Yeah, my
Right.
guess is that we want to keep communication channels open as much as possible, and the embassies provide that. So even more important than the DPRK embassy in Caracas, for me, is the Venezuelan embassy in Pyongyang, because imagine if there is a pro-US government in Venezuela, or if the US is effectively running the country, as Trump mentioned, then you have a US embassy in Pyongyang. So
Ah,
that what role can the Venezuelan embassy play in communication between the US and North Korea? That's interesting. I know
yeah.
Yes.
That
it's one
to to
scenario, but still.
to continue exploring that possibility there. So if Venezuela does undergo some kind of change, and maybe if not closes its embassy, at least transforms its embassy, and if, with Cuba also under pressure from the United States, how isolated does North Korea risk becoming in the Western Hemisphere, and what are the practical costs that could follow for North Korea in North and South America?
So I think it's a very hard position from North Korea right now, because of course there is Venezuela, but how we look at as South Americans or Latin Americans is who's next. And there are very like progressive governments such as Mexico and Colombia that are very concerned with what happened. So I think that there's just further isolation for North Korea, because the whole region is turning to the right. There was a pink tide past years, but now this reaction from the right. And in my country, for instance, Chile, we had elections and we turned from left to right, and there's this huge chance that North Korea will be more and more isolated in the region. But still, I think that North Korea in the past has managed some similar situations. Like in the 70s, there were just anti-communist military dictatorships, and they still managed to have some presence, not through like regular missions or official channels, but there is also another way of engaging through public diplomacy, or supporting um, paramilitary government parties. So I think that North Korea has managed similar situations in the past. So I think that even if it's isolated, I think it will still have some presence in the Western Hemisphere. I don't know if you agree with me, Gabriela.
That's a good point. Now, Gabriela, in your piece for NK Pro last week, you wrote that if both Caracas and Havana sever ties with North Korea due to U.S. intervention, Pyongyang's only remaining diplomatic presence in the Western Hemisphere would be in Brazil and Mexico, dramatically reducing North Korea's influence in the Americas. Can you tease out a little bit the implications of that?
Yeah, so again, I think it's mostly symbolic, but still very important for North Korea because, of course, in terms of economic trade, in terms of military partnership, we can't compare Latin American partners with, North Korea's big friends like China and Russia. It's just you can't compare the two. But in terms of Latin America, I think North Korea will be losing key. If of course, if Trump intervenes in other countries, North Korea would be losing key allies in terms of its like anti-US coalition, its anti-imperialism coalition, which it's always, North Korean media is always talking about, the New World Order and, wanting to paint the US as the evil hegemon, and of course rallying, with North Korea rallying with other like-minded countries that stand against the US. So in this sense, of course, they will still have allies in other parts of the world, and they won't be completely, shut out in the, Western Hemisphere either, because of course they do still have, North Korea still attends like UN General Assembly in New York. There is that
Right.
that communication office in New York. That's not gonna just go away either. But in terms of Latin America, yeah, it's more of that symbolic decades long, those communist allies, that might disappear.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, it makes North Korea stand a little bit, I guess, more alone internationally. But at the same time, I personally do not think, even if, let's say, Cuba falls and they install some democratic regime in Cuba, even if that were to happen, of course, okay, North Korea would lose an embassy. They would lose some footing and influence in the Western Hemisphere. But in the grand scheme of things, you know,
Mm-hmm.
will it affect North Korea majorly? Like in the short term, no, because it still has Russia, which is by far the biggest, the most important partner for North Korea now. So in the short term, I don't think it'll make such a big difference. In the long term, maybe, perhaps, especially if talks with the U.S. remain stalemated as they have been over the past few years. Maybe in the longer term, it would hurt North Korea more. But in the short term, no, because again, the economic military relations have always been quite limited.
Does either of you expect Pyongyang to reallocate scarce diplomatic resources toward regions that where the ties are more resilient? So, for example, parts of Southeast Asia. And what might be some early indicators that we might see that going on? Camilo, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's it's a country that has limited resources, so there is a chance that they might just give up on the region from a very official diplomatic perspective. Of course, maintaining presence through other channels such as the Korea Friendship Associations, that they play a role. And one thing that I wanted to mention is that it's not just the so-called traditional communist allies of North Korea and Latin America, but there are progressive governments in Latin America which are not communist, but they still want to engage with North Korea. There is a sense from a Latin American perspective that we need to open up this isolated country. And there's been from many governments, such as Argentina's in the time of Perón, or Chile during Salvador Allende administration, that they kind of dreamed of being an intermediary or a kind of to play a role in inter-Korean dialogue. So I think that it's important to understand that it's not just the traditional allies of North Korea, but there are Latin American countries that want to engage with North Korea in their own terms. So I think that, yeah, they might give up on this region because it's clear from the U.S. actions that this is effectively America's backyard. So, but yeah, I think that they will focus more on Asia more than anything. And I think that it's that it's not only North Korea, but I think that China is also making the same adjustment. The only country that we from Latin America we don't know what will happen is Brazil, because I don't know if China will be ready to give up Brazil. But other than that, I think that every single major power understands that this is part of U.S. sphere of influence. We're going back to realism.
Yeah. Gabriela, any comments?
Yeah, so I think there could be, depending on like Camilo said earlier, that of course now we have a trend in Latin America that is moving more to the right. So I think while some previous governments have been more interested in engaging with North Korea, the governments that we see now in place, maybe not as much. So we will have to see maybe in the future if there's new elections in some of these countries and more progressive left-wing leaders get elected, maybe that would change, definitely, though. So that's possible.
But does that mean that North Korea will reallocate its resources to other countries?
For now, yes.
Yeah.
So I think in the immediate future, it makes most sense to do that. So especially Southeast Asia, ASEAN, because North Korea already has a presence in ASEAN. They have the contacts there. They have been working with ASEAN for decades as well, for a long time. So I think it makes more sense to do that. Maybe parts of Eastern Europe, like some Russian allies, that's also possible. But I think mostly in Southeast Asia, I think that's where we can expect to see more of North Korea expending its diplomatic resources in the near future, at least.
Now, I want to look a little bit at some lessons that North Korea might be drawing from this, and not just looking at what happened in Venezuela last week, but looking a little bit more broadly at in Syria, the collapse of the Bashar al-Assad regime in 2024, 2025, and also the current unrest that we're seeing in multiple cities in Iran, in the Islamic Republic of Iran. What are some parallels and some key differences that we should keep in mind when we're assessing what lessons North Korea might draw from all of these tumultuous changes in countries that it has historically had very friendly relations with? Camilo?
Yeah, I think that the kind of most important lesson is that is reinforcing what North Korea already, how North Korea understood the world. The fact that they're alone, that they can't rely on their allies, the idea that there's no way they can give up their nuclear deterrence. So I think that more than teaching new lessons to them is to reaffirm what they already knew. Like we knew that. It's and that's the funny thing with the whole Venezuela episode is that it's written in North Korean newspapers like 5 years ago that it's possible that the U.S. will attempt something. So I think that yeah, it's more of a confirmation of what they already knew, and historically, the way that North Korea has depicted the U.S. government, and now you have a confirmation. I don't know how much North Korea used this and reported the Venezuelan episode to the domestic audiences, but it's basically showing them. And I think it's a source of legitimacy for the North Korean leadership. It's still dangerous out there. There's still this U.S. imperialist force that we are the only ones that are going to keep them out of the North Korea. The northern part of the Korean Peninsula. So I think not like new lessons, but confirmation of what they already understood.
Confirming, right? Okay, Gabriela.
So yes, I completely agree with what Camilo said. Definitely reaffirming what North Korea has feared for long, what they have been saying for long. It's great propaganda for North Korea. They will be, definitely reporting on it continuously to show that what the U.S. really is, what the U.S. really stands for, and why they need their nuclear weapon, why North Korea needs their nuclear weapons, why they shouldn't trust the U.S. In terms of Iran and the other countries, I think. In Iran is the big one now for sure for North Korea. North Korea will be watching what happens in Iran very, very closely because multiple reasons, but namely because Trump already made threats and already kind of promising that, telling the protesters to keep going, that help is on the way, and that he's, pretty much hinting to multiple times already that he's going to do something in Iran. So, and during the press conference when they announced the whole Maduro operation, Rubio said to the world, like, don't play with the US because Trump is not like other presidents. Trump will actually follow through with his threats. So North Korea will be seeing for sure if Trump follows through this time in Iran, because if he does, it's on a whole other level than Venezuela, because Iran is much more complex. It's much more, it would be much more difficult to remove the regime there. It would be an operation on a completely different scale. So if North Korea sees that the US actually does something directly to depose the regime in Iran, or at least tries to, it would be a massive signal to North Korea that, not only reconfirming, but also just pushing them towards greater hostility, greater defensiveness from the U.S., and closing themselves off even more to potential diplomacy with the U.S., at least under Trump. So I think the implications of a possible U.S. operation in Iran or U.S. involvement in the potential regime change in Iran, I think that would be one of the biggest developments for North Korea in terms of foreign policy and the recent history. So I think that will be very important.
Now, North Korea is often pointed to past examples of regime change like Iraq and Libya and Afghanistan when talking about its own need for self-protection. And I'm just wondering whether after the events in Venezuela last week, are there any narratives or policies that that Pyongyang might adjust either domestically or externally when sort of talking, telling its story to to its own people and to the world?
Well, I think, we already know that North Korea uses a significant amount of propaganda domestically. And I think more than changing, again, like Camilo said before, more than changing anything, it will be just taking this latest story, because that's what North Korea likes to do, is taking stories that are really happening over the world, around the world, news, and showing it to its people and saying, look, this is why we are the way we are. This is why we don't trust the US. This is why we have nuclear weapons. And this is why we need to struggle so much economically to protect ourselves, because otherwise we'll end up like that. So I think we'll see a lot of that in the media. We'll see a lot of that in being told to the North Korean people. And we saw that, for example, when President Yoon in South Korea declared martial law. I mean, North Korea, that was such a golden opportunity for North Korea to just totally use that as such great propaganda domestically. So I think that will definitely be something they'll be doing a lot.
So effectively, North Korea has been handed a free propaganda win.
Yes, for sure.
In the actions of the US in Venezuela. You agree, Camilo?
Yeah, I agree. The only thing that I really don't know what will happen if the Chavismo and the US work together, because both Trump and Rubio mentioned that they were willing to work with the Chavismo, with the Venezuelan leadership, as long as they behave. So I don't know if North Korea can translate this to North Korean audiences. So if there is some sort of collaboration between the Venezuelan leadership and the US, how will North Korea translate that to their audience? My guess is that it will be just silence.
Yeah, it certainly could be. Now, a day or two after the abduction of Maduro, an unnamed spokesman for the DPRK Foreign Ministry, quote, strongly denounced the U.S. hegemony-seeking act committed in Venezuela as the most serious form of encroachment of sovereignty and as a wanton violation of the UN Charter and international laws. Now, was this in line with the level and the tone of the response that you had been expecting from Pyongyang, Gabriela, or were you expecting something different, maybe a statement given in the name of Kim Jong Un, for example?
Well, yes. I mean, I guess that would have also been definitely very possible. But I think, again, it shows the level, because North Korea, yes, it has few allies, but it does have different levels of allies. And so I think Venezuela was never one of those that was the most important or one of the top, I think if it was an ally of greater significance or greater importance, greater consequence to North Korea, then maybe even Kim Jong Un would have come out and said something. Yes, but because it was, Venezuela, an ally, but not such a consequential ally, I think this statement sure makes sense. And again, if you see it in the context of all the other news stories that they've been reporting about Venezuela over the past few months, you see that it's not just that one statement. It has been more. So yes.
Yeah, it's interesting that here there was a statement by Kim Jong Un that went viral, in which he described Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro as his friend, and he warned the US that oppression against Venezuela could lead to a new world war. And this was fake news, but it was a thing here in South America. It was reported, it was in every newspaper that Kim Jong Un supported his friend.
This was before January 3rd, was it?
Yeah, it was before the official statement by the DPRK, this spokesperson. And the thing that I find interesting about the spokesperson, the whole speech, it was that they mentioned to the UN Charter. So it's basically North Korea saying, the US is destroying this international order. So in the past, we had, this anti-imperialist approach and, talking the US this rogue and brutal state. But the fact that the North Korea is using the same institutions and the same international order that the US helped building against them, it's something that I find interesting.
And it's also the same United Nations that has sanctions against North Korea and has condemned North Korea for missile launches and nuclear tests and human rights abuses, etc., etc. Yeah, so there is some irony in there, perhaps a little bit of hypocrisy. Now, you've already said before, Camilo, that this is really reinforcing Pyongyang's belief that nuclear weapons keeps its leadership safe from external coercion, up to and including, the rendition of its leader to a foreign country. I'm wondering, how might this harden positions in any future dialogue between the United States and North Korea on denuclearization or arms control?
Yeah, I think it's impossible to talk about unilateral denuclearization. Like it's not even on the cards. Like I can't imagine a scenario in which North Korea will just give up their nuclear weapons, and there is nothing that the U.S. could actually offer to them. I think not even easing sanctions will do it. It's just I struggle to see a scenario in which North Korea will just give up their nuclear weapons. So this makes any attempt at dialogue even more difficult if the U.S. is committed to pursue this denuclearization strategy.
Gabriela, do you agree it's one more nail in the coffin of denuclearization of North Korea?
Yes, 100%. If it wasn't already dead before. Yes. It's definitely something that will become even more, I don't want to say impossible, but seemingly impossible, at least in the near to middle term. And again, North Korea is looking at Trump's actions compared to his words. He's seeing, of course, what he did to Venezuela, but also with Iran. North Korea's had quite a few examples under Trump as to why not to trust him. Trump said last year he expressed interest in negotiations with Iran and diplomacy with Iran and coming to a deal, and then when the deal didn't materialize, he bombed Iran. So same with Venezuela. He's like, oh, offering Venezuela, he said before, like, oh, we would offer to talk and to work this out. We're trying to work it out, and then weeks later, you have the U.S. military taking out Maduro. So
Yes.
for North Korea, it is it. First of all, they've already said that they are not interested in talks with Trump, with the U.S. They've been saying it all of last year. They've been saying it pretty much since the Hanoi summit. But now, not only if they didn't have reason to talk to Trump before, they definitely don't have reason to talk to him now. Barring an impending, direct threat to their survival, which I don't think is there now. And also, as long as they have the support from Russia, that's another key factor. As long as the war in Ukraine continues and they have that partnership with Russia and that military, especially military relationship with Russia, I think there are less and less reasons why North Korea should risk it all, really, its survival, the Kim family, everything, to have even a meeting with Trump or even lower level negotiations. It's going to be difficult. It's not impossible. So again, lower level negotiations could take place. Yes, Trump has expressed interest, so they could try, but it does seem very difficult, and North Korea will be much more guarded this time around compared to 2018, 2019, when they had hope. That there was widely reported that North Korea really did hope for a deal, and they really did think they could get there with Trump. They had high hopes, but not only the Hanoi summit, that whole experience with Trump showed that it's not going to be that easy. And now, since then, in this gap of I don't know how many years, 8 years, the world has changed so much. Geopolitics has become so much more complex, and Trump's recent actions in multiple countries has just, made the situation much more difficult for Kim Jong Un to say, yes, let's sit down and talk. I think it's going to take a lot more. And like Camilo said, I don't think even if the U.S. says, okay, we'll give you sanctions relief, I don't think that'll be enough. Like that might have been enough it would have been enough, I think, in 2019 if they really came with a package for sanctions relief. I think, North Korea would have taken that and they could have gotten some kind of agreement. But I think this time around, even if Trump says, okay, we'll give you a nice package, a sanctions relief package, I don't think that would be enough either. Not this time around.
It's interesting you say that. I just want to point out that Chad O'Carroll of NK News and NK Pro thinks that it's possible that the recent events might scare Kim Jong Un, or at least motivate him into choosing to engage with the United States once again. But you obviously don't see that as being very credible or likely.
Um, I I don't think in the near future. I think he has more to lose than to gain.
Yeah.
Again, of course, North Korea's main
Right.
goal does remain the same. So I do think, of course, they will always want to have that deal with the US. They do want that, those security guarantees. That still will always remain the priority, the end goal that North Korea wants. They will want a deal. They will always want a deal. But are they willing to risk so much in this context of this very complex security geopolitical situation? Are they willing to risk it, especially knowing they still have Russia's backing here? Yeah, it's
Right.
a bit difficult to say in the near future, at least.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think
Now,
that
Camilo, do you think there are any realistic confidence-building steps or measures that the U.S. or its allies could offer North Korea to reduce the risk?
not really. I don't think. I think that North Korea wants, and in response to that question about the article by Chad, I think that North Korea wants to engage with the U.S. as much as possible, but I think that the giving up nuclear weapons is not on the cards. Like it, but engaging with the U.S. it's good for them. It's good for the North Korean leadership, because it's proof that they can eh, you know engage with a major power. So they act really as a big power in the global scenario. But yeah, I don't think there's anything that they can offer the North Korean leadership.
Okay. Looking internally within North Korea, both of you are very familiar, of course, with Rodong Sinmun and North Korean media. So this is a question for both of you. Inside North Korea, how might the leadership use this recent crisis in Venezuela to rally elites and also the general public? What sort of propaganda frames do you foresee, and what should analysts be watching for in the Rodong Sinmun or the KCNA to track whether that's happening?
Okay, so when you read the Nolong Simon or Roland Simon from a historical perspective, you see some links or series of events that everything starts with the Korean War. So this is just one episode. That's the last part of the whole chain of events.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it more than introducing new information, it kind of reinforces everything that the 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 North Korean leadership knew about the world, and how it communicates it to the domestic audiences. So it's still a dangerous place outside. There's still this threat, and we are the only ones who can actually contain or keep them out of the northern part of the North Korean peninsula. So I think that's interesting, how this episode is not an isolated episode, but a part of. And I don't know if North Korea is willing to revisit what happened in the Western Hemisphere in the past, because again, this is not the first time that there is a U.S. intervention in Latin America. There's a whole so I don't know if they will frame this as something that a long history of U.S. interventions in the region, or if they will take this approach of this is part of world history. World history is basically us fighting against the United States.
Okay, Gabriela, any comments?
Yeah, so I think especially toward the elites, like you mentioned, that will be important, because to the general public, it will be again reaffirming that okay, the US is not to be trusted, and all of that'll just continue, maybe become even stronger with this whole Venezuela situation. But I think, yeah, to the elites, the message, I think, can be made stronger in the sense that, North Korea's diplomatic presence abroad, how I guess in terms of Kim Jong Un's perspective, like the need to really safeguard the remaining diplomatic presences that North Korea has abroad, especially in strategic places. So especially, like, for example, Latin America, Brazil will be a big one, because that one is Brazil is a major country in Latin America, a major point of entry for North Korea, for any country really, into Latin America. So that will be very important. I'm sure they're in close communication with their people in working in Brazil. That is going to be very important for sure. And then in general in the world to maintain whatever like embassies they have, diplomatic presences that they have, how to engage with new partners as well, partners that may be aligned ideologically with Pyongyang. I think that will be kind of expanded on maybe this year and moving forward to ensure that it does not remain isolated, because North Korea, of course, a lot of people look at North Korea as this very irrational state, but it's actually the opposite. It is very rational. They have a strategy for everything that they do. So if they see that, okay, some of their dominoes are falling in South America, they will want to reinforce their presence and standing on the global stage in other places wherever they can. So I think that will be another focus, like we said previously. And in terms of Rodong Shinmun, what we could see or look out for, any kind of wording related to the need for greater I think, again, we see this a lot already, of course, like greater military preparedness, readiness. We see that, but how this might translate in terms of actual changes in North Korea's military maneuvers, perhaps, there have been some articles that say maybe we could see some form of Russia-North Korea military exercises. That would be something that would be a big step up from what we see now. That could it is possible. It was unthinkable a few years ago, but I think it's becoming increasingly possible. That's something we could definitely look out for. So in the months leading up to something like that, or some big military change like that, North Korea will probably be, putting out little signals in their media, calling for pretty much stating the reasons why that would be justified. So I think those are some things we should look out for.
Okay, last question for both of you, and I'm going to have to ask you to give me a brief answer because we've gone a little bit over time already. Over the next 6 months, what concrete events would tell you whether North Korea-Venezuela ties are persisting or fading or are being rebuilt under new terms? Camilo?
Yeah, and look at the embassies. What will happen if Venezuela just, withdraws its presence from North Korea, vice versa? I think that will signal the future of this bilateral relation.
Great. Okay, and Gabriela?
Yes, beyond the embassies, also, I think who's in power in Venezuela. So is it still Delcy Rodriguez? Is it somebody else? Is it someone from the opposition? Is it a vacuum? Is the U.S. just running everything? So that will be and is the U.S. still there? Because right now the U.S. is there, but will it be able to maintain its presence there in the medium to long term? That we don't know that yet. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you very much, Doctor, for coming on the podcast today. I appreciate both of your time and your expertise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Explore the unofficial world of DPRK-inspired apparel at NK News Shop. Dive into a captivating collection of North Korea-themed t-shirts, hoodies, and more at the NK News Shop. From the popular Daedonggang beer t-shirts to the adventurous Air Koryo designs, each piece offers a unique glimpse into aspects of the DPRK you'll be familiar with. Featuring retro travel-inspired prints of Pyongyang's landmarks and brands, our apparel is 100% handcrafted in the USA. Support independent journalism with every purchase. Explore our range today at shop.nknews.org. That's shop.nknews.org.